One of the least appreciated books in the standard works of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is The Pearl of Great Price. Here we have a collection of, 61 pages that a person might be tempted to overlook. I can recall one of my predecessors telling me that when it was first contemplated as to whether there should be a course in The Pearl of Great Price, that one of the university personnel questioned whether or not there was enough material in order to last for a semester. At this point, I don't think I've ever gotten through the 61 pages in the way we teach The Pearl of Great Price, but it's a remarkable book, and I've often thought that Franklin D. Richards, who pulled together this wonderful little collection, probably didn't at the time realize the significance of what he was doing in terms of meeting a present need, and in doing so perhaps preparing something that would one day be a godsend to the Latter-day Saints in terms of one of the books of our standard works. And so today what we'll discuss is The Pearl of Great Price. Why The Pearl of Great Price? How might one approach a study of The Pearl of Great Price? What would be an approach that we might use? Joining us today, Professor Andrew Skinner, Professor Joseph McConkie, Professor Camille Franck, Professor Richard Draper, Professor Michael Rhodes. I'm Robert Millett. We're members of the Department of Ancient Scripture in Religious Education. Brother McConkie, I've heard you on more than one occasion talk about how you approach the teaching of The Pearl of Great Price with your students the first day of class. Why don't you visit with us about that?
All right. What I do, and I've had some success in doing, is inviting the students to outline the course. And the way that I would do that is first introduce them to the content of the book, which you can do quite simply. Now, consider with me what you have in The Pearl of Great Price, and then let me just invite the group to do what a class would do, and that would be to outline the course. Now, what you have in The Pearl of Great Price is, first, the Book of Moses. The Book of Moses consists of 8 chapters. It comes lock, stock, and barrel from the Joseph Smith translation. It is, in effect, the first 8 chapters of the book of Genesis. So you'd start with the first chapter, which is a marvelous revelation. The entire chapter would be a restoration of text in which we learn about the experience that Moses had in point in time, sometime after the burning bush and before he led the children of Israel out of their Egyptian bondage. It divides itself into 3 parts. In the first part, Moses is caught up into an exceeding high mountain and has this magnificent experience with God. At the conclusion of that experience, the middle part of the chapter recounts an experience that he has after the glory of God has been withdrawn from him, and Satan himself comes and acts, as it were, at least attempts to act as his mentor, and challenge Moses to worship him. Moses comes off victoriously in that situation, learning the great lesson that is associated with it, that he is to discern between that which is of God and that which is of the prince of darkness, and because of that is invited to return to the visions of glory that began in the first part of the book. So that's the kind of material that we use to introduce Moses and the book of Moses. Chapters 2 and 3 in Moses would just be the inspired version account of Genesis 1 and 2 that tell us the story of the creation. Chapter 4 of Moses, the first 4 verses, are a flashback to the pre-existence, probably Joseph Smith's first encounter with the concept of a heavenly council. And then in the verses that follow, we have the story of the fall. Then in chapter 5, we have a marvelous account of Adam and Eve's experience as they've gone out together now into the lone and dreary world. And so it's an extract from the dispensation of Adam. The 6th chapter is primarily, and the 7th chapter together, an extract from the writings of Enoch, the marvelous experiences that Enoch had, which includes a panoramic vision of the history of the earth from his day down into the millennium. Then the 8th chapter is an extract from the experiences of and writings of Noah, as he goes out and declares the gospel prior to the flood. So that's what we have in the book of Moses. Then comes the book of Abraham, which of course we get from the Abraham papyri. We have 5 chapters and 3 facsimiles. In the 1st chapter, we have this remarkably interesting account of Abraham, seeking after what we would really understand to be the fullness of the blessings of the temple, or of the priesthood. Then we would have, in the next chapter, among other things, our most perfect account of the Abrahamic covenant. Then in the 3rd chapter, we have this wonderful priesthood lesson that begins with this magnificent vision that he has of Kolob and the stars of heaven, and learns of the order of heaven. And then this interesting transition into a discussion about spirits and the order of spirits. And then in the final 2 chapters, chapters 4 and 5, we return to the story of the creation, but we discover it's distinctively different than our earlier account of creation, because this account is telling us about the council of the gods, where they created, as it were, a blueprint for creation. So that's what we have there. And of course the facsimiles. The first one, Abraham on the lion's couch, and where he is the sacrifice, as it were. The second,
the hypocephalus.
The hypocephalus, magnificent overview of really the universe.
Yeah. God's plan and power.
Yeah. And again, something that's closely related to what takes place in the temple. And then we have the 3rd, with Abraham sitting on the throne of Pharaoh, and some interesting symbolism that would be there. Leaving that, then we return to another extract from the Joseph Smith translation, this time from the New Testament. This is the 24th chapter of Matthew, which is the account of the last day of Jesus' public teaching in his earthly ministry, where he spends it in the temple, and then at the day's end goes down to the Garden of Gethsemane, and there in the privacy of that garden with the apostles responds to questions for them. And they ask questions about when the prophecy will be fulfilled relative to the end of the nation of the Jews and the destruction of the temple, and also relative to the last days, dealing with the destruction of the wicked. And what we see here is this magnificent cycle of events that he tells them will repeat itself in the last days. And then after the book of Matthew, then we get what was and is the first 5 chapters of the documentary history of the church, which tells us the story first of Joseph Smith's first vision, then in the story of the coming of the angel Moroni and the coming forth of the Book of Mormon, and then the story of the coming of John the Baptist and the restoration of the Aaronic priesthood. We also have an interesting footnote in which Oliver Cowdery gives his account of the restoration of the Aaronic priesthood. And just as a little aside, let me note that I think it really is significant that priesthood is never restored save there are 2 men present, or keys, to accord with the law of witnesses. So it is an interesting thing in the providence of these kinds of things that you have 2 testimonies of that event included in this account. And
both Joseph Smith and Oliver Cowdery.
Both Joseph's and Oliver's testimony of that event. And then finally we have the Articles of Faith, in which Joseph responds briefly to what were, I would suppose, the most often asked questions or concerns raised about what Mormonism is.